gentlemen and lady of the Senate. I'll likewise be brief in my remarks. And I also want to explain why I'm also going to oppose this bill along with the Senator from Anderson. And I want to reiterate from the outset that it has nothing to do with Boeing. I'm extremely proud of Boeing being in our state. It's one of the two blue chip airline manufacturers in the world along with Airbus. I'm extremely proud of them being in South Carolina. I'm proud of the job that our South Carolinians are doing for that company so well to the extent that they want to expand. But this is why I'm going to oppose this particular bill. There's three reasons. The first is a matter of process, and that's what the Senator from Anderson was talking about. And it's almost like Groundhog Day in terms of the last time this bill came up, last time a bill like this came up for Boeing. That was 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember we came back to take up governor's vetoes. And we were told that very day that there was a bill that had been taken up in finance. Here it is, passed out to members of the Senate. And we were told we had to vote on it right then because we had a chance to get Boeing to relocate or to establish business in South Carolina, and that if we didn't do it right then, we were going to lose that opportunity. And I remember talking at the time about being frustrated about not understanding the terms of the incentives, the terms of the deal, any of the things that I feel like I would need to know in order to explain this to a constituent. But I voted for that particular bill at that point in time because I did think and was told and did believe that it was something we had to do right then. And I said to myself, though, after that vote, that I was never again going to allow myself to be in a position where I had to vote on something that important without understanding all the details inside and out. And yet here, as I say, it's like Groundhog Day, the movie. I feel like I'm right back in that bucket because I came to the Senate yesterday after a 2-week sojourn or a 2-week sabbatical or furlough. And the senator came up to me the morning before session and said, "How are you going to vote on the Boeing bill?" And I had absolutely no idea what the senator was referring to. And he went on to explain that apparently for the past several weeks there have been discussions among members of the legislature, members of the Department of Commerce, the governor's office, and that they had come up with a package whereby they were going to borrow, or the state was going to borrow $120 million, and that $120 million was then going to be used to purchase land and improve land that was then going to be utilized by Boeing in connection with an expansion. And shortly after that, we had the Senate Finance Committee meeting. I mean, it all moved so rapidly. The bill got read across the desk, and then it was right before us in Senate Finance. And so I asked the chairman of Finance, and he graciously agreed to have Mr. Hitt make himself available. And I do appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, because I know he had to change his plans and make arrangements to come before Senate Finance. And during that Senate Finance Committee meeting, I attempted to find out, what were the terms or what was the deal? What was the arrangement? Who was going to own the land? Where was the $120 million that the state was borrowing? How was it going to be used? Under what terms was the occupant, Boeing, going to occupy the property? Was it going to pay any sort of ground rent or any sort of rent to the state? Was there going to be any clawbacks in regard to if the stipulated number of jobs weren't created? What was going to be the income level of those jobs? What was title to the asset? What was going to happen to that, the fee simple title to the improved asset once the bonds were defeased? The various things that you would want to know, or that I would want to know as an attorney if I were representing a client and trying to explain the merits of a deal. I kind of feel like a client on behalf of my constituents because I'm going to have to go back to them and tell them, what did we do? We borrowed $120 million. It's going to be paid for at the general fund over time, and the money's going to benefit a private company, and I've got to stand before them and answer questions as to that. And I can't answer those questions. Mr. Hitt was very frank with me in saying they don't have an agreement finalized with Boeing in regard to clawbacks. They don't have an agreement finalized with Boeing in regard to the dollar levels of those jobs. There is no agreement in regard to what happens to fee simple title to the improved asset once the bonds are defeased. In fact, Mr. Hitt told me that it was extremely likely, Senator from Charleston, that at the end of the 15-year amortization period on those bonds, the asset would just be given to the private company. There were no details in regard to any of those things. And it troubled me that they were coming to us, or that we were being asked to authorize $120 million worth of borrowing to put into a private project, and we didn't have an agreement outlined with that private entity as to the nature of the deal and the nature of their obligations. And it seemed to me that we're putting the cart before the horse, that before they come to the General Assembly and try to get authorization to borrow $120 million to put into this private venture, that there ought to be an agreement in place that we could look at and we could understand, what the obligations were. Because as it stands right now, Senator from Anderson, there are some obligations in this bill. They've got to create 2,000 jobs. Doesn't talk about the salaries that are paid. Now we're told that they're engineers, and we're told that they're $100,000 salaries, and it may well be the case. That's not part of the agreement. I was told by Mr. Hitt that they intend to negotiate some clawbacks. They don't know exactly what those clawbacks will be, but there's no obligation once this bill passes for there to be an agreement in that regard. No obligation whatsoever. So first, in regard to process, I find myself right back in the same position I was several years ago. I'm being asked to vote for a bill, and I don't have all the details. And we like to make a lot of fun, or I do anyway, of Speaker Pelosi in Washington when she says they had to pass the Affordable Care Act in order to find out what was in it. I mean, I feel, it's even worse here because even if you take your time, like I tried to last night, you still can't find out what's in it because it hadn't been agreed to yet. It hadn't been negotiated, it hadn't been signed. And so, in regard to process, the fact that, this has transpired over a few weeks, none of us knew. The fact that it came up and we're having to vote on it, actually vote on it, one day after it got read across the desk for the first time, I don't think that is a deliberate and a proper way to go about spending taxpayers' money. So that's my first concern, is in regard to process.